Facebook is being accused from within the company of being a ideological monoculture, which is kind of like a monocle, except for a guy with only one eye, right? So I'm just going to read this page and 3 lines. Quote unquote, "We have a problem with political diversity." Now, this is an internal memo within Facebook. I'm going to link in the description the New York Times article, which has more information that I'm going to get into because I want to kind of wrestle with the ideas in here. Capitals, the problem. We are a political monoculture that's intolerant of different views. We claim to welcome all perspectives, but are quick to attack, often in mobs, anyone who presents a view that appears to be in opposition to left-leaning ideology. We throw labels that end in "obe," I think he meant phobe, and "ist" at each other, attacking each other's character rather than their ideas. Now, this is basically what I want to talk about. No matter where you land on the political spectrum, within the rhetorical spectrum, most of us land on attacking people rather than ideas. And I'm guilty of that too. Like, you'll see me get passionate, and like I have to be really careful and really aware of that, and sometimes I slip up and I end up attacking a person because I'm basically disagreeing with their behavior, and it's really difficult. Most of us don't think in argument. Most of us, for most of our lives, think in narrative. And narrative has a particular construction. I've talked about this in certain videos, and I get really technical and kind of lose a lot of people, but narrative is basically always centered around a character interacting with an environment, right? And that's basically what a narrative is. It's always a character and an environment. So when we go into an argument or when we go into a response to something that we encounter, especially in the digital landscape, which is, again, made up of characters within an environment, we don't necessarily interact with what the character does. We interact, or we latch onto, our feelings latch onto, whether positively or negatively, to that character. And we end up either defending or, attacking the character. So most of us are stuck in that, and it's very difficult, and it actually takes a lot of practice for most of us to concentrate on argument. Now, between attacking a character and attacking an argument or a belief is the attack or the criticism of a behavior. And it's really, when you start to criticize a behavior, you get into this whole problem of intentionality. And you have to be really careful whether you're ascribing, like you're mind reading the character, you're ascribing intentionality to that person that isn't necessarily there. And also, when we go after a character, we end up talking about their weaknesses. And when we praise a character, we end up, talking about their strengths, which is an effect. It's not that who, it's still that who in relationship to the what. It's still the character's relationship to the environment. So it's very difficult when we enter into discussion, especially when it becomes passionate, that those passions are always going to latch onto a character. So it takes a lot of practice. And that's why I think it's very important for us to cultivate not just a free speech environment, but an intelligent speech environment. I'm not saying that we need to have gatekeepers or anything. I think we need to self-police and kind of not necessarily police each other, which means like shutting other people down, right? But expecting or prodding each other, or even more gently, encouraging each other to engage at a higher level of discourse, to detach from the brute, passionate judgment of that who, which we can never really understand. And this is why I really enjoy certain religions that basically say, let God be the judge. Like that position a deity or a creator who has created everything, that ultimately has the responsibility to judge every single person. Right. But we still need to go through life judging people, principally so that we ourselves can be better and cannot do the same things that we don't like in others. Judgment is very necessary, but it needs to be brought back to its its highest use, which is the perfection of us as characters, right? And who has responsibility for those characters? It's our own selves and what ultimately created us. But it's still our responsibility to kind of shepherd each other towards a better, environment, because ultimately our environment is created out of characters. To continue. We do this so consistently, this is the memo, we do this so consistently that employees are afraid to say anything when they disagree with what's around them politically. HR has told me that this is not a rare concern, and I've personally gotten over 100 messages to that effect. Your colleagues are afraid because they know that they, not their ideas, will be attacked. They know that all the talk of openness to different perspectives does not apply to causes of social justice, immigration, diversity, and equality. On these issues, you can either keep quiet or sacrifice your reputation and career. Now, the problem, I think, with a monoculture or with an orthodoxy, if it's not built on very carefully examined values, an orthodoxy will end up becoming more and more rigid, more and more calcified. And the way that that occurs in real time between characters is that individuals go around and force other individuals to act or to speak, which is another way of acting, especially in this landscape. In this landscape, it's all action that appears as verbal. We live in a very verbal environment, whether they're typed up or they're pictures, it's all expression, especially in the virtual network that we are all enmeshed in right now. We are judging each other constantly on our speech acts. So when an orthodoxy takes over within the realm of speech, then that tends to have the effect of boosting up certain signals and diminishing others and punishing people who produce signals that don't jive with that orthodoxy. And so it's not necessarily the orthodoxy that's the problem, or orthodoxy itself. I want to make exceptions for certain sorts of systems of thought. Not every system of thought or network of values is going to have the same result. So certain networks of values will provide space for people to interact with ideas in more than one way, to see ideas, to see subtlety, to see nuance, right? And that will always happen within, basically, we could say, an ideology. So it's not the fact that it is a monoculture. It's the fact that the way that this monoculture is emerging within Facebook, within Google, within certain colleges, which I won't name just for this one episode. The way that it's emerging is the suppression of people who are looking at things in a different way. And not just the suppression of those people, but the cutting off of the people who accept that system from very necessary information that does not come in the package of their, proper signal. To continue. These are not fears without cause. Because we tear down posters welcoming Trump supporters, we regularly propose removing Thiel from our board because he supported Trump. We're quick to suggest firing people who turn out to be misunderstood, and even quicker to conclude our colleagues are bigots. Now, there's a problem, and to get back to what I'm talking about, there's a problem within this specific monoculture where judgment is very certain, where basically the scarlet letter is alive and well, where Puritanism, where witch hunts are very quick to come into being. So there's a puritanical fundamentalism in the way that this culture is executing or exerting itself. And that's the problem. It's not the problem with the culture in and of itself, but there's something in that culture. I want to ask us, or I want us to prod us into looking at why the left, so-called within these, these institutions of very much power right now, what is causing the tendency. I don't have the answer to this, but I've been exploring those answers, and my channel will continue to explore why these specific cultures have the certain result of actually pushing out people and therefore diminishing their access to certain information, which will tend to turn around and bite them in the butt. And why does this always take the frame of personal attacks? And I want to say that the left, so-called, not the left itself, and you can, or progressivism, let's say, or whatever term you want to use, whatever it is that I've been critiquing, whatever it is that manifests at Facebook, at Google with the Damore memo, for some reason, the people who are the champions of these ideas take certain arguments personally, certain arguments that don't agree with their ideology, I believe they see, the leftists or the progressives see, as actually harmful to other persons. And so I think that within their narrative of social justice, of whatever it is, of equity, of diversity, of openness, of immigration, these ideas are very important to them because they are protecting persons. So they end up attacking people who disagree with them. Now, the problem with that is that there might be more nuance to how these certain ideas actually do affect people and how they scale up, let's say. When certain leftist progressive ideas get to a certain mass, they tend to have a certain result, which does, in fact, hurt individuals. Right? And it hurts individuals on its way to that path by first squashing their speech and besmirching their character. To continue, we have made all lives matter a fireable offense. We put Palmer Luckey through a witch hunt because he paid for anti-Hillary ads. We write each other ad hoc feedback in the PSC tool for having offensive ideas. We ask HR to investigate those who dare to criticize Islam's human rights record for creating a non-inclusive environment. And they called me a transphobe when I called out our corporate art for being politically radical. Part 2, why this matters. This is not okay. Not just for our internal culture, but for our own viability as a company. While the problem isn't unique to us, we are entrusted by a great part of the world to be impartial and transparent carriers of people's stories, ideas, and commentary. Congress doesn't think we can do this. The president doesn't think we can do this. And like them or not, we deserve that criticism. We are blind to and dismissive of what people beyond our walls, let alone even within our walls, think about complex issues that matter. I've been here for nearly 6.5 years, and this has gotten exponentially worse in the last 2. Now, I think the last 2 has something to do with Trump. Absolutely. Whatever happened with Trump, but it's happening around the world. There's a rise in a certain sort of what people call nationalism, or what people critique as ethnocentrism. There's a certain rise of reactionary far-right stuff that really, for whatever reason, strikes fear into the heart of people. For whatever reason, people feel that that movement is something to be taken very seriously and very personally. And so I think that everything has kind of been turned up a notch because whatever people see that threat as, they see it as a very substantial threat to their project of progress. And so everything's been really turned up. But in turning that up, right, and turning up the rhetoric and turning up the passion, they've shown the weakness and actually exerted personal slights against individual people. And so a lot of the stories that have broken over the last year since I started on YouTube with Evergreen. Evergreen's target was Brett Weinstein. Google's target was James Damore. Wilfrid Laurier's target was Lindsay Shepard. The trans rights target was Jordan Peterson. So it's really interesting that what we see emerge in the center right or the moderate right left or this IDW or whatever this emerging counter movement to progressivism that doesn't align itself with the far right, we champion, and I'm one of them, we tend to lock on to certain individuals. And then we feel very personally connected with these individuals that are championing this individualism that proceeds, let's say, through a certain sort of rationalism, through a certain sort of detachment or calming down, I want to say, or I want to propose, maybe nobody else believes in this but me, but a certain calming down of the passions, or I guess we can say the really, really bad word, civility, which means a certain recognition of each other as individual entities who are bequeathed with a reality that is distinct and sacred in and of itself. And so in order for me to communicate with that person, I need to recognize and found everything on basic respect. Now, I'm sure you can go through my stuff and see me being disrespectful. So I have my ideals and I don't live up to them. I don't know if that necessarily makes me a hypocrite, or insofar as I'm a hypocrite, that necessarily disqualifies me from being noble, but it certainly does make me human. And then section 3. F beers for political diversity. The divengers, let's say. I don't know how to fix this problem on my own. What I do know is that these issues can't be fixed if we continue to be isolated and silent. So that's what this group is for. A, to be a space where you can talk about these issues without fear of the mob, and in the process, B, to talk about how we can fix this. Bolded. If you're interested in helping make Facebook a company that's more tolerant and active-minded about different political and ideological perspectives, join FBers for Political Diversity, or the Divengers. There's only going to be one core rule in the group, and it's that if you attack a person's character rather than their ideas, you will be banned. Let's see where this goes. Now, again, I want to say that that is going to be a very difficult mission to accomplish. People will end up attacking other people's character, and it's going to take a very fine sense of moderation to actually guide people toward the process of growing stronger in the ability of engaging with ideas rather than characters. And so that's kind of what the one problem I see with this group is, that there is this rule, there's already this hard and fast rule that doesn't take into account that human beings as characters in a environment, as pieces of stories, right? People change. People need to change. The most enjoyable parts of life and of art are moments of change. And whatever causes those moments of change should be investigated and really understood so that we can guide discourse and guide basically our responsibility to each other and to our environment toward a place where we can view things in a complex manner. Now, I'm not saying we should tolerate hate on an individual level, but the problem that I have with that is that who gets to decide what is hate and what isn't hate? And if we actually develop a thicker skin with regards to speech acts which are seen as offensive and can be construed as violent, if we lessen their violence quotient, put them in a box and examine them, we will see the flaws. If we look at them seriously, we will see the flaws of what we call hate. And running away from that is only going to make it stronger. I'm back on the job, back on the clock. I got 2 more days of in-service. Today's in-service was really freaking annoying, and you can probably tell because it was like 6 hours of word salad with very watery, inspirational dressing. And so I'm kind of flushing that out right now, and I probably just made a bunch of word salad for your brain to munch on. Love you all. Here's a really cool one. I hope you enjoy this.